Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. Hope you're doing well. So we're headed towards a major escalation in this global conflict, and seems to have something to do with the dollar and with gold. And I'm going to make that case for you here in this video. We'll talk about the escalations that we're witnessing and what we can expect moving forward. Myself, just headed into this holiday weekend here. We got President's Day on Monday. I think we're kind of ripe for some kind of an event. What that might be, I'm not sure, but you know, these things tend to happen over the weekends. It's a long weekend. Well, we'll see how that plays out. But first, you know, I've got the price of silver pulled up here, and I think it's interesting to note that today was a pretty good day for silver, and we had earlier this week this sharp sell-off following the higher-than-expected CPI data from January, and yet you'll note that by the close today on Friday, we have made back all of those losses and then some. And, you know, look at what happened in markets today. We had all of the major stock indexes in the red, but you had gold in the green, silver significantly in the green, up over 2%, and crude oil looks like it is about to cross the $80 mark once again, and this largely has to do with the conflict that is escalating in the Middle East. Now, you know, when this conflict really begins to take off, I think that it's going to have a big impact on the price of commodities. We're going to watch this play out in front of our very eyes. Of course, if you want to get yourself some gold or silver, make sure you check out the channel sponsor SD Bullion. Right now, new customers can get gold or silver at spot by visiting sdbullion.com/new. Now, I mentioned that this conflict, I think, is likely to have a lot to do with gold and with the dollar's status. And I think it's very interesting. This is from yesterday. We had Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller laying out the case for the world's continued reliance on the U.S. dollar and the currency's dominance in international trade. This is, according to this report here from Reuters, they say that status is a key advantage for the U.S. economy on the global stage, 100%. But it's very curious to me that this guy is getting floated out here right at this time to talk up the dollar status. If anything, I think this tells us that the Federal Reserve is actually concerned about these threats to the extent that they feel like they need to address them in this manner. Now, he points out here, or this article does, that U.S. adversaries have few alternatives to the dollar, with international investors shy about using China's currency, for instance, for a range of reasons, including a lack of confidence in Chinese institutions. Now, that is true. I mean, we have seen an increase in cross-border trade using the renminbi. We have seen an increase in cross-border trade using the rupee from India. We had India buying oil, for example, last year from the UAE, 1 million barrels of oil using the rupee, but the dollar is still the predominant currency, and that's what they want you to think is going to be the case for a while. And I think this has a lot to do with why we are witnessing this conflict escalate in the Middle East the way that we are. Now, this is a quote from Waller, who said, "I do not expect to see the U.S. dollar lose its status as the world reserve currency anytime soon, nor even see a significant decline in its primacy in trade and finance. Recent developments that some have warned could threaten that status have, if anything, strengthened it, at least so far." Of course, one of the things that strengthened the dollar so far has been the Fed cranking up rates. That's kind of a topic for another video, but that's going to be something that has to change very soon here. But this was interesting. Waller mentioned here stable coins. He pointed out that the use of digital assets like stable coins are overwhelmingly tied to the dollar, and this tends to increase the U.S. currency's international profile. Now, that is very interesting, and it kind of reminds me of another stablecoin that we heard about last year. It's been about a year now since we heard about a stablecoin in the works between the Russian and the Iranian central banks to create a gold-backed stablecoin. Iran, now a member of the BRICS organization, by the way. So, you know, these are the two countries. Russia we were essentially in a de facto conflict via Ukraine, a proxy war with them, when this announcement was made. But since then, who have we gotten into a conflict with? Well, Iran. So, I've talked about this in the past, and I've had a few people in the comments say that it's a bit of a stretch to attribute the conflict to the threats to the dollar status as a world reserve currency and these alternative currencies that are being posed by our geopolitical rivals. But, we don't hear anything about this from the mainstream, of course. There's a lot of reasons that we're getting involved with this conflict, right? There was the conflict between Israel and Hamas, but this conflict is much bigger than what is going on there. Eventually, this is likely to embroil multiple theaters of war, and I don't think we're going to see a de-escalation anytime soon. In fact, I talked about how the price of crude oil was up today. Look at the chart, $79.22. The fact is that the global economy is slowing, and yet we are seeing crude oil rising. So that is an indication of just how bad this conflict is getting. Just yesterday, Reuters reporting that U.S. carries out 4 strikes on Houthi-held areas of Yemen. So we're continuing to launch airstrikes against a nation which, by the way, we are not at war with technically. I mean, we haven't declared war. I don't think Congress has really authorized any military action here. This is all just being done by executive fiat, and it's not stopping. I mean, we're seeing this continue to escalate. This was interesting. We had a top diplomat saying U.S. strikes on the Houthis will stop when the Red Sea attacks end. Well, we know that's not going to happen anytime soon, and it doesn't seem that these strikes on the Houthi positions are really impeding their ability to carry out these strikes against global shipping. And, think about this. Think about, in light of what we saw with the CPI report earlier this week, inflation is not declining the way that we're being told. I mean, it was hotter than expected. The trend is moving back upward, the rate of inflation. Now we got crude oil rising as a result of this conflict, and global shipping remains disrupted. A major transit route, the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, now becoming largely inaccessible to Western nations and nations that have backed Israel. So this is going to have a huge impact on inflation moving forward. It's going to be a tremendous problem, especially given this is an election year, especially given the fact that very likely, regardless of how high inflation gets, the Federal Reserve is going to have to cut rates. It's going to drive this problem through the roof, likely going to drive the price of crude oil through the roof. It's going to drive other commodities very high. And, that's my forecast moving forward, because it doesn't seem, again, that there's any sign that this is going to de-escalate. And, we know what this is all really about. It's about defending the dollar's status. It's about telling the BRICS nations that we're willing to wage a war. I mean, you got Iran in the crosshairs here of the military and of the military-industrial complex, it seems. They're hawks in Congress, the congressmen who, likely receive large contributions from the folks building the missiles. They're pushing for strikes on Iran. They've been doing this for months now. And, the way this tit for tat is going back and forth, eventually someone's going to make a miscalculation and you're going to see a broader conflict erupt. And it's going to be a big problem for the global economy. Look at this one. U.S. conducted cyber attack on suspected Iranian spy ship. Now, this, I think, is indicative of how this conflict is likely to escalate into other theaters. It's not just going to be kinetic, it's also going to be cyber. And, this is the sort of thing you have to watch out for over a long holiday weekend like this, whether it be a retaliation from the Iranians or a feigned one, one of those... I'm not going to use the words because I don't know if they're going to get picked up by the algorithm, but an FF attack, you know what I'm talking about? It's very possible that we could see that in the realm of cyber warfare, because we're seeing this conflict move over into that realm. Of course, everybody talks about the Houthis, like that's who we're fighting. Of course, this is all really about Iran. And the reason that we were conducting this cyber attack on this Iranian spy ship was to prevent them from sharing information with the Houthis. So you can kind of assume that those organizations, those elements are more or less one and the same here. At least they're aligned on the same side of this conflict. We talked about this in a recent live stream, but I just thought it kind of fit in here how you had blasts at a natural gas pipeline inside of Iran, saying it was an act of sabotage. Again, that they're going to retaliate for this. I think that it's only a matter of time. I mean, who knows what exists inside of the U.S. for that matter? I mean, do we have backdoors built into our critical infrastructure? Have people crossed the border and are living in this country waiting for a signal? I mean, it's scary stuff, but it's worth thinking about because, I don't like to be too doom and gloom, but it's like we're watching this thing play out in front of our very eyes, and I think it's important at least to be aware of what the risks are here. And also, you want to be independent of digital systems of support, especially the digital financial system. I think that's probably a huge Achilles heel here that, hopefully we've got defended. But the Iranians and their pals over there in the BRICS nations, they don't necessarily have the same military resources that the United States does. The United States, who spends nearly $1 trillion in defense annually, but that means that what they've done is they've focused on asymmetric warfare techniques, which could include cyber warfare attacks, potentially on critical infrastructure here in the U.S. So, that could wreak a lot of havoc, something you got to watch out for here. We talked about crude oil. This number, I think, is going to continue to move much higher as we watch this conflict escalate. I mean, so far, they're kind of still acting like this is just business as usual. At least that seems to be the impression in the mainstream media. But I think we're all just being desensitized to this at this point, and this conflict, again, continues to escalate in a significant way. You've got Israel launching more airstrikes into Lebanon at Hezbollah bases. You have got recent airstrikes in Lebanon now claiming civilian casualties. So again, that is a major escalation. Now, this is the most recent update. It says from 54 seconds ago from the Times of Israel. Israel reportedly behind a rare pair of recent strikes on Iran's civilian infrastructure. So this thing is heating up, and that's why we're seeing the price of crude oil on the rise. It's because of the geopolitical risks here. So look, there's a big problem. I think it has to do with potentially gold and the dollar. Russia and Iran, two countries that are talking about trying to replace the dollar for cross-border payments with this gold-backed stablecoin. The Fed, Fed Waller rightly pointing out that there's not a lot of great alternatives for the BRICS nations, for example, as they look for alternatives to the dollar-based system, but one that they can rely on and that they don't have to worry about counterparties is gold. And so I think that, the fact that Iran is making noise about a gold-backed stablecoin is potentially why they're in the crosshairs. The fact that the Fed is floating this guy Waller out right now to talk about how safe the dollar's status is, I think is a big indication that the contrary is true and that they're trying to get out there and, jawbone confidence in the dollar. Of course, we know this whole thing is a big confidence game. And when the game of musical chairs ends, there's probably going to be a big rush to real money out of these fiat currencies. When is that going to come? Well, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I think it's important to get prepared for that beforehand. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay safe and happy stacking, and I will catch you next time. Smart